The next item we are going to be discussing is called list, and it's not a function, it's actually a language construct. So if we search for it, list, there we go. And if we check the documentation, it says it assigns variables as if they were an array. And if we scroll down, it returns an array. And like array, this is not really a function, but a language construct. List is used to assign a list of variables in one operation. And if we scroll down, parameters, they are basically variables. And as we scroll down, obviously you can see there might be one or more. We've got these square brackets again. As you may remember, square brackets indicate it's an optional argument or parameter. And then we have return values, returns an assigned array. But we don't really use list to return array. It does return array, the array which is assigned to it, but it's not how we use it actually. Let's quickly go to the editor. Let's quickly create a simple array, and I'm going to call this array profile. So, and I'm going to use square brackets, and I'm going to put my first name, my second name, and I'm going to put some town, Bristol, for instance. Okay, now, before using all these methods that we've already discussed earlier, how could we retrieve some these values basically if we want to, let's say, only have this first item, the first name? We would simply use echo. Let's say if you obviously want to return this, display this in a browser. Otherwise, we would use return or print or whichever other method we would find obviously appropriate. But the way to get the value of the array is simply using the name of the array and then the index. Obviously, we haven't got associative array here, so we have index automatically added, in which case we're simply using the numerical indexing starting from 0. So obviously the first item would be profile, and then in the brackets we would have 0. And if I now save it, preview it in a browser, if I go to the browser, refresh the page, we have Sebastian. Fair enough, that works fine. If I want the second name, I would simply use index 1, refresh the page, and again, that works just fine. And the same obviously works for the third item. But obviously, using this approach, it's not very descriptive. We don't really know what item we are trying to return. So what list does, if we try and use this list language construct, it allows us to associate these items from this array to the variables, giving them names, obviously. So if let's say in this list, I'm going to create the first variable called first name, then the second variable last name, and the last one will be town. And what I'm doing next is assign this profile array to this list language construct. So what happens now? All these items in the same order as they are in this array are now represented by these variables. So what I can do now is simply echo first name. And if I save this, preview it in a browser, there we go, Sebastian, so it works. Then if I want to, let's say, use town, then I can do it this way, refresh the page, and as you can see, Bristol. So it all works exactly the same way as calling the index on the, simply the index on the array, but this time, now, we have some variables which actually have some meaning, basically, which have some meaningful names, which are obviously later on easier to recognize basically what we're trying to get from this array. So this is how you can use list in order to basically associate items from the array with the variables. Next we have exit and die. We're gonna start with exit, which is pretty much the same as die anyway. So if we go to exit, we have output a message and terminate the current script. And then we have the description. It's a void. It's a language construct, and it's a void one, which means it doesn't return anything. You can pass an optional status as a string or an integer. And then we have terminates execution of the script. Shutdown functions and object destructors will always be executed even if exit is called. So now if I click on this shutdown functions, we're going to ignore these object destructors yet, because we are not talking about object-oriented PHP in this season. Let's quickly have a look at this register shutdown function. Register a function for execution on shutdown. Basically, when script terminates, this function basically specifies what still will run regardless of what's going to happen. Basically, if we hit this exit line anyway in our script, nothing after exit is going to be executed, but whatever's inside of this associated basically with this register function, shutdown function, will still execute anyway. Okay, so let's quickly have a look at the parameters here. And it says, obviously, before we go to the parameters, exit is a language construct and it can be called without parentheses if no status is passed, because you don't have to put the status at all. You can just call exit and then obviously semicolon to terminate the script. And there we go for the parameters. And there we go. Status. If status is a string, this function prints the status just before exiting, which means if we put the string in between the parentheses, then that's what we're going to see in the browser. If status is an integer, that value will be used as the exit status and not printed, which means we won't see anything in the browser. Exit statuses should be in the range 0 to 254. The exit status 255 is reserved by PHP and shall not be used. The status 0 is used to terminate the program successfully. We're not going to be bothered with this integer option here. We're going to try exit with the string status though. And obviously it says it returns no value because it's obviously a void type. Okay, let's go to the editor. We are going to start with this register shutdown function, which takes the some callback basically. We're going to use the closure here, so function. And inside of this function, what I'm going to do is simply echo something so that we can see that this actually runs even though we called exit. Echo, let's say, hello from within the shutdown function. And the exclamation mark. Okay, so this is what we're going to return from this register shutdown function. Don't worry about it. It's highly possible that you're never going to use this function during your coding. But if at any point you need something to run after the script has been terminated for any reason, basically, this is how you can use it. Okay, so we've got this function here. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this exit language construct. Inside of this exit, I'm going to say of just, actually maybe not of just, because we've got single quote, actually and let's use the backslash to escape the single quote, just exited the script. Okay, so this is our exit. And now if I try and echo anything after this, you can see my IDE is automatically highlighting this because it knows that after exit, nothing's going to be returned to the user, basically. So this line should not show. Okay, and we know it's not going to show because we've already discussed that exit is going to terminate it. But as you can see, because we have this register shutdown function, what should happen is when we hit this exit line, this will be printed in the browser. This obviously will be ignored because we exit in the script, but shutdown functions, as the documentation said, will still be executed. So after this line, we should see whatever's inside of this closure associated with the shutdown function. So if we save it and preview it in the browser, go to course.dev and refresh the page, and there we go. I've just exited the script, but this hello from within the shutdown function also has been printed in the browser, because obviously, as the documentation said, if I just go back one, it says, if we scroll up, shutdown functions and object destructors will always be executed even if exit is called. But the line after the exit was not, and whatever we would put here would not be executed. There's also a die language construct. If we go back to our browser, on the right hand side you can see we've got the link to die, and it's basically the equivalent to exit. So it does exactly the same thing. They are just two different names for basically the same functionality. It redirects, as you can see, it's a language construct as well, and it takes you back to the exit the page basically for the documentation.